my name is Mariya Koroleva. I am a former synchronized swimmer. I competed in the last two Summer Olympic Games, which was London 2012 and Rio 2016. And then after Rio, I retired. So I've been officially retired for 4 years. Um, Synchro was obviously a huge part of my life for 17 years. And yeah, I had a pretty long career on the national team and then also swam for Stanford University. So kind of did the whole collegiate swimming slash national team, Olympic thing. So kind of got my athletic experience was kind of on those three different levels. We got club, when you're younger, then collegiate, then national team. So I feel like I kind of got all types of experiences in the sport. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
Okay, now I'm going to start off with one thing that's fairly obvious, but may not be fairly obvious. Underneath that watch, there is something.
That is right. You caught it. Yeah. So I have the Olympic rings tattooed on my wrist, and actually I usually wear my watch on the other hand, but because I'm working and I'm writing with my right hand, I switch over the phone. But usually it doesn't. The watch doesn't cover the tattoo. But yeah, I got the tattoo in 2012 after the London Olympics. I got it on my wrist because I wanted it to be in a place where I could see it easily, because I wanted it to remind me of basically what I accomplished and what I went through to get to those Olympics. And now, after those first games, anytime I was having, a bad day or I was going through something hard, I could always look at my wrist. And as cheesy as it sounds, like this really was the case. I would look at it and be like, okay, if I could do that, if I could get
Right.
through, that year of 2012, which was, I still think to this day, probably the hardest year of my life, I can do anything.
Right.
I can get through this one day. So yeah, it's been a nice reminder of that accomplishment.
Well, one of the things that I run across when I talk to Olympians, former Olympians, which I don't think most of them think of themselves as former Olympians, just not current Olympians, is that that's exactly what you said. I've trained hard. I've sacrificed my time, my life, relationships, my body, the whole 9 yards. And oops, the electricity went out for an hour and a half. Okay, that's nice. There isn't a lot that you can't overcome because you've already overcome it.
Yeah.
And the question that people have when they don't know what goes into the Olympics is that how do you do that and why do you do that? And I think that tattoo, it's like, I'm glad I saw that. That kind of gives you a reminder of, yeah, I can do things because I want to do them.
Mm-hmm.
Not because it's by being forced to. You're an Olympian by choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that motivation is different for everyone. Why you decide to do what you do and why you decide to give up, your entire life for years on end in order to reach this goal. I I don't know. It's sometimes hard for me to explain really why I did what I did. I think that Olympic dream at some point is born, and then it's just like you just have tunnel vision, and it's you want to get to that goal so bad. And the further I got in the sport, the more I wanted to get to the end. It's like the more years you have behind you, you want to finish what you started. And
Right.
I think that's why I didn't. There were so many times in my career where I could have stopped. I could have retired. Even after my first Olympics, I could have retired and been happy with what I accomplished. But it's knowing how much you've already done. You want to keep going and keep going and keep going and see
Right.
how far you can get. And yeah, it's not easy by any means. I think synchronized swimming, I would be like, I would argue any day that it's one of the hardest sports in the world. And I think one of the toughest parts is just how much we have to train, how many hours a day we have to train. I'm friends with a lot of other elite athletes and Olympians, but no other sport has to do what we do. Maybe gymnastics, maybe figure skating probably come the closest, but I still think that synchronized swimmers train the absolute longest. And it's just, it's a hard lifestyle to maintain. Definitely. It's not easy.
Well, as I mentioned off the air, I talked to Leah Panetta a little while ago, and as I was having that conversation, I started thinking about more things that I didn't know. So I went back and looked at a few more things. And one of the questions I asked her was, okay, so she's 5'2" and you're 5'5".
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's in a normal sport, that's like, okay, whatever, not a big deal. But when you're upside down in the water and your legs are sticking out, your legs have to stick out the same height.
Right.
That doesn't sound possible.
You're at a big disadvantage if you're on the shorter end. And Leah, she was 5'2", so for her, it's that much harder to match that vertical line. I mean, yeah, if your leg is this long and somebody else's leg is this long, well, then you have to get that much higher to match with them. And she actually, because she was on the shorter end of the team, she was often our flyer. And I'm sure maybe she talked about that, she was the one who was being thrown out of the water because those, we get the smallest, lightest girls to be able to do that. I was always kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of height, but actually both of my partners, I had two different partners for my two Olympic games. They were both taller than me. And so, yeah, it's like you have to make up for your physical leg length with trying to get higher out of the water, which can be really difficult. It basically means you have to work harder to get to the same height. Now, sometimes girls who are really tall, you would think like, oh, the taller you are, the better. But sometimes they can also be at a disadvantage because when you're taller, you can't, it's harder to move quickly.
Right.
So it's like, there's pros and cons in both. I think maybe 5'7" to 5'8", maybe that would be a good height for a synchronized swimmer. Like you said, I'm 5'5", so let's just say the natural. Actually, now it's funny. Now as I think back, I really, my body type and my genetics really are like not good for synchronized swimming at all. I'm not tall. I'm not naturally skinny. I'm not naturally flexible. I was born already with a kind of a weird deformity in my lower back that then caused me a lot of pain in my sport. So I really shouldn't have been a synchronized swimmer at all. So I look back and I'm like, gosh, that's kind of crazy that even, given those genetic maybe disadvantages, I was still able to do what I did. So
one of the overriding factors, and I told you how many people we spoke to, is that most everyone that I've spoken to so far wasn't, well, I was blessed with God-given ability and blah, 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 blah. Most of them have said, I don't know, and I just kept, and I had a dream, and now, wow. We spoke to Willie Banks, a triple jumper. He said, all I can do is jump. I can't run, I can't play, I can't catch, I can't, and I'm, set the world record in the triple jump. I found out the one thing I could do, and I do it well. We spoke to Lenny Kraselberg, and he's like, I was a junior college swimmer, and I had to ask to be on the team. And then one day, as I could keep progressing, I set 3 world records in 4 days. But there's that progression of, part of it is, it's what I want to do. And not just because I do it well, but because I want to do it. And then I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep getting better. And that's the thing you're talking about, working at the club. Those are the things that now you're giving back. And you're giving back to that same, feeding that same passion into people. And I think that's a fantastic thing. So let's go back to your club days. When you said, now you're not predisposed to be a synchronized swimmer, yet you became a synchronized swimmer. What was that mindset, and how did you get to that?
So the way I got into synchronized swimming, which by the way, I should probably note, since the 2016 Olympics, the name has been changed to artistic swimming. I still call it synchro because it's just a hard change for me to do. So I'm technically have been calling it incorrectly, but just forgive me.
Me too. That's okay.
but the way I got into the sport was I was actually born and raised in Russia, and my family and I moved to the US, to California, when I was 9. My dad got offered a job here in San Francisco as a software engineer, and so, back then Russia was just, the economy was really, it was just really tough to live there. So we moved to the US, and I none of us spoke any English. I knew like a little bit, just a few words. Um, but really it was pretty difficult for all of us to assimilate into the culture. And so my parents wanted me to do something outside of school, some type of activity that will help me make friends and kind of just get used to living in a new country. So just totally by accident, we got a flyer at school. This was beginning of fourth grade. I was 9 years old, and it just said, there was a 2-week crash course in synchronized swimming. And I did a little bit of rhythmic gymnastics and a little bit of swimming back when I lived in Russia. And so this just seems like a good combination of the two. And I tried it out, ended up liking it. To be honest, it was a little weird at first that we did a lot of stuff on land. And I
Right.
was like, why are we on land? We should be in the
Right.
water. But yeah, it seemed fun. And then they asked me if I wanted to join the year-round program. And I said yes. And the rest was history. I mean, I definitely was not one of those kids who is like a child prodigy. And when they first start, when they're little, it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to be so amazing. And they're like the young star who's going to, who has all this potential. I was always kind of in the middle of the pack until I was about 14 or 15 years old. And that's when I really started, or my coaches started seeing some real potential, for the national team and beyond. So, so yeah, at first it was more just kind of for the fun, to, to have friends outside of
Right.
school. You're like dancing to music and sparkly suits. So it seems, it's just fun. And
It
then as I got older, then it became more about the competition and, okay, how do I get better? How do I improve? How do I make this team or that team? Um, and then, then it became much more serious.
Now, so once it becomes serious, is it still serious? Is it like,
Um,
this is still kind of fun? I'm hanging out with new people. I still have sparkly suits. I'm still playing around in the water, but I'm also doing it competitively.
I think it's a different kind of fun. It's
Okay.
like, and I remember I would get asked this, especially, as I was training for the Olympics. Oh, are you having fun? How is, just that word fun kept getting brought up a lot. And it was like, oh, well, the day to day, no, I would not consider it fun, because because you're training
Right.
8 to 10 hours a day. It's a grind. It really
Right.
is a grind.
There's
But
the
the
word, right?
fun comes more in, going to the competition and presenting what you've been working for the whole season. The fun is in improving and seeing those improvements in
Right.
yourself and seeing your scores go up. And I mean, yeah, gosh, the day to day is really tough. Like, and if you were to, to look at me, you know in 2016 or in 2012 before the Olympics, it's like you're tired, you're training so much, you get one day off, and you're trying to use that day just to recover. You don't really get to do, the normal fun stuff that regular people get to do.
Right.
But it's like that traditional definition of fun just gets changed a little bit, you know what I mean?
You,
And then when
you
you get
learn
to the
to
competition.
you learn
Oh,
to
sorry.
enjoy the grind. No, that's right. You learn
Yeah,
to
yeah,
enjoy the grind. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and it's not, yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it comes naturally either to enjoy like the hard work, you know, but
Right.
I think that's something you learn over time. Um, and then, yeah, you get to the competition, and that's where the real fun begins, is when you get to perform. And that's one of the, the aspects that I think a lot of people love, people, who are synchronized swimmers or artistic swimmers, to be able to perform in front of a big crowd, to perform with a team, and or
Right.
in a duet, the team of the duet event. I think that's really special to be able to share those experiences with your teammates, as opposed to being an individual sport, whereas maybe
Right.
you're in a team, like, speed swimming, but you're still competing for yourself. You're not
Right.
competing with, you know other
Or you're
people.
competing against time or against the course,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
right, right, yeah.
yeah.
Well, okay, so let's fast forward to we'll kind of forget for the moment because I have a question about the Stanford thing as well. But let's fast forward to 2012 or a few months before that. When does it hit you? Not just because you've been named to the team, but when does it hit you? I actually might be able to go to the Olympics. When does that go? I'm good enough to be in the Olympics.
Yeah, I think when you either get named to the team or when you actually qualify for the Olympics. So for us, we don't our qualification, there's different competitions that you could qualify for the Olympics for or in, but we usually qualify through the Olympic qualifier. It's called the Olympic
Mm-hmm.
qualification tournament. It's usually in like March or April of the Olympic year. So you go to that competition, you have to place, a certain within a certain number of duets. In my case, I was competing in the duet event. Um, and so, yeah, when you qualify, that it really becomes real. Like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to the Olympics. But I don't know. I still felt like I I didn't feel I didn't fully feel like I was like I was going to become an Olympian until you actually get to the Olympics, until you actually compete. It's like you're still not fully an Olympian. And
Right.
even when I walked in the opening ceremonies in London of 2012, I know a lot of people say that's when they feel like they've become an Olympian. But in reality, I think maybe more I'm like more of a realist like that. Like you could go to the opening ceremonies and still get injured and then never
Right.
compete and you never
Right.
become an Olympian. So for me, it was after that first day of competition, that's when I was like, oh my God, I'm an Olympian. Like that's when it really hits you. And really, I mean, for someone who goes to or just multiple Olympics, I think most people will say that the first time around, it's just such a whirlwind. It's so overwhelming. It's your first time like seeing everything and just seeing how everything works. And the second go around is you're a little bit more present and a little bit more like in the moment. And that's how it was for me. I mean, the closing ceremonies in London of 2012, I remember walking out of the stadium in London and it kind of like hitting me then, like, what the heck just happened? Like, did I really just compete in the
Right.
Olympics? I remember I would look at photos like after I was home, weeks later looking at photos and I was like, was that me? Like, did I really just do that? It's
Right.
you know what I mean? Like it's such a whirlwind and it all happens so quickly. It's like you don't even have time to really digest it fully until you step away from it and then you think of it and it's like you get to almost like relive it within your memories. Um yeah, it's such an amazing experience that you're building up to it for years and years and years. I mean, some people have that Olympic dream from when they're 7 years old, and then so quickly in just a matter of a couple of days it's over. And then if you're going to train for another Olympics, then you got to start right back at the beginning of those 4 years, at the beginning of the quad, and you got
Right.
4 years to go. um yeah, I feel like I kind of went on a little
No, no, that's
there.
exactly that. Believe me, most people do the same thing because it's like, there's no set answer to that. But once you come up with, it, you're like, yeah, that's what happened. Now, the reason I asked it out of order because when you go back to Stanford, or when you begin at Stanford, what are your goals there? Your goals to make the Olympics? Your goals to win a national championship or to win a Pac-12 title, or is it I just want to be a good swimmer here at Stanford?
Yeah, so when I was applying to college and looking for collegiate or colleges that had a synchro program, my goal was to swim for that school and also be training to potentially make, the Olympic team or the Olympic
Okay.
duet. So my my parents, being, us being from Russia, there's always a lot of focus on academics. So it was
Right.
always like, okay, you can keep swimming if you want, but you have to put school first.
Right.
And so for me, going to a school like Stanford, a university like Stanford, that has the best academics, but then also had a great synchro program that could give me that training, to potentially to try to make a national team. It was just the perfect combination. Now, it's not something that a lot of people try to do simultaneously. People will either try to do the national team thing full time or the college route full time and swim collegiately. It's not easy to do both at all. I mean, it's like you're kind of being pulled in different ways, two different ways, because you have to compete for your school, and then you also have to somehow train for the national team. It's a push and pull. And I know for me, I really wanted to do both. um Definitely was not easy. But I think if you really want to do it, you can make it work. I think people a lot of times get intimidated by just how big it seems. Like, both of those goals are big goals that take up a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of sacrifice. And when people think about doing it together, it's like, oh my God, that just seems impossible. I don't even want to attempt it. um but yeah, I really wanted to do both, and I was, I'm grateful to have been able to do that. um and yeah, I took my senior year was the year of 2012, and so I took that year completely off so that I could train full time with the team. And then after the 2012 Olympics, I came back to Stanford and finished my senior year, swam collegiately, and then got back on the national team a couple years later.
Well, and also you're looking at something as far as you're saying you're looking at being pulled from two different directions. You forgot to mention those, pesky academics at Stanford, where maybe you have to go to class and pay attention to what's going on there. So, yeah,
Yeah, well, and Stanford is one of those schools that, and I don't want to say I'm not going to say anything negatively about other I'm not talking about Ohio State, because Ohio State is not like this. But there's a lot of big football schools, for example, in the
mm-hmm.
South, or where you hear, oh, the athletes, all they have to do is just show up to class and they can get a passing grade. And it's they don't really have to meet the same standards as everybody else academically. Well, Stanford has always prided itself on the integrity that they have with their academic and athletic programs, that you are still held up to the same standards academically. Yes, they'll allow you to take your exams on a plane when you're on your way to a competition,
Right.
which I had to do multiple times. But you still, like, you don't get a pass. You don't
Right.
get you have to do all the work that everybody else has to do. And I'm sure obviously it depends on what you're studying too. I mean, I was a comm major, which is not, it's not like chemistry or human biology.
Right.
So it was, I would say, probably on the easier end of majors. But still, like, even
Right.
comm was hard, so yeah, it's definitely don't want to minimize
Yeah,
the
yeah. You don't have to be
commitment.
in a lab or anything like that, but
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, and that's the problem that some people have with some schools, is that the major sports, you don't have to take a full load during the sports season, which kind of defeats the purpose of being there, I think.
Yeah.
Now this is talking from someone who took 27 years to get out of college, but anyway. But so when you get through 2012 and you get home and you're looking at the pictures, you're going, wow, that was me. I can't believe I did that. And then what makes you think, but I'm going to do it again?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I told
I
you to be one
never
of those every time. Yeah.
yeah, I never expected, or I never wanted to go to two Olympics. Like, that was never part of the plan. It was always go for 2012, finish that. I knew I would have to go back to Stanford to swim one more season collegiately. And then it was like, okay, that was going to be it. But that year, or I guess it was 2011 and 2012, the coach that I had that coached me, Mayu, for the London Olympics, she kind of changed my mind. And it's not like she was trying to say, oh, you should keep swimming or you should try to go for another Olympics, but she, as a coach, pulled something out of me that I didn't even know was there. I think she was the one who really made me enjoy the process of
Right.
working hard. And she made me realize how much more I had in me, that how much further I could push myself and how much better I could get as an individual. And that's what made me so excited to go, to go back to Stanford, finish my collegiate career, and then go back to the national team and improve, and kind of keep going and try to make it for a second time. And actually, after I graduated from Stanford, I I didn't make the national team. They didn't want me anymore, basically, which was heartbreaking for me, because not only did I not have a plan B, like that was my plan, was to
Right.
finish school, finish college, and then go to train full time with the national team again. But the fact that I felt like I had so much more to give, and they did not want me. I was told that I was not skinny enough, not flexible enough, that I was too old, and I was 23, and this is after I had competed in the Olympic Games.
Right.
It's like a stab in the heart,
Right.
after you've given up so much, and then here you come back and you're, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and just ready to go and ready to train and to bring value to the team, and then you're told, we don't want you. You're
Right.
like, you're old news. That's how it felt. And so, yeah, it was incredibly difficult, and honestly, I feel like it hurt, like, me as a person, not even just me as an athlete,
Right.
but because I felt like I had sacrificed so much, and then it was like a slap in the face, you know but for whatever reason, I still had an inkling inside of me that I just wasn't quite done yet. And so I told myself, I'm going to go back to my club team here in California. I'm going to train with them for a season, and then I'll come back to the national team trials the following year. And if they really don't want me, then okay,
Okay.
I will retire, but at least I will feel like I gave it my best shot. And during that season, I started grad school, I started coaching a little bit, and I I trained with, 16, 17-year olds, and I was 23. But yeah, it's like there was just something in my gut that told me, you need to you need to keep going. Just try one more season, and then if it really doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And it ended up, being kind of my redemption story, because the following year I came back to the trials, and I won. I think I don't think I won like the overall rankings, but there were certain parts of it that I like placed way higher than everybody else. And so then they had no choice but to put me,
Sure.
on the team. And then a year later, I was named to the Olympic duet. So that was a very unexpected route for, to my second Olympics.
Right.
Like I said, I didn't even think that there would be a route to a second Olympics. But yeah, it was pretty crazy to think back on that. But I'm so proud of myself for not quitting when I could have.
Was it more important to prove to them or prove to you?
I think at that point, to them, because I felt like I knew what I could bring to the table,
Right.
to the team. I felt like I knew what I could be capable of, and I felt like I had so much leeway to improve and to get better. And I felt like the people in leadership didn't see that. And so I
Right.
wanted to prove to them that I can do, all these things that you said I couldn't. And I sometimes, to be honest, I look back and I'm like, gosh, like, why me? Why did I have to go through all of that? Why, there's other people who just, you just kind of work hard, and then you achieve what you set out to achieve. But
Right.
why did I have to go through these, having to prove myself, and these like challenges that I had to overcome, and kind of like feel sorry for myself sometimes, like, because I know how difficult a lot of those years were. But then on the other hand, I look back and I'm like, well, if those challenges hadn't been placed in front of me, I maybe wouldn't have, you know
Right.
gone back for second games when
Right.
because I wouldn't have felt like I had something to prove. So now looking back, I'm grateful for all of those challenges and for the opportunity to at least try to overcome them. I mean, I'm sure it's way more difficult when you don't end up overcoming them, but every challenge is going to teach you some type of lesson. And it's like, I know I'm veering off
No,
on
no, no.
on a
That's
tangent here,
perfect because
but
you're
you know how
going to the
people,
next thing.
yeah, but you know how like people say when people ask, what advice would you give to young athletes, and people just say, well, just never give up, and work hard, and it'll work out for you.
Yeah.
And the reality is, sometimes you can do all of that, and it still won't work out for you. And so I think it's easy to say, oh, just don't give up, don't give up. I think there are times when you do have to give up, and you have to, and it's not giving up per se. It's more making a conscious decision to do something else, and leave what you were doing behind. I mean, I could have stayed and swam for another year after 2016, but no, I decided to retire. You could see that as giving up.
Right.
So I think it's a kind of a too much of a blanket statement just to say, oh, just don't give up, keep going. But I think you have to look at it at a, case by case basis with the challenge that you're presented, you know, and really listen to your gut. And if your gut says keep going, then you should follow it. I think when people give up prematurely is when they get intimidated by a challenge,
Right.
and I think that's the advice that I would give, is not necessarily don't give up, but just don't be intimidated by the roadblocks that you might be seeing in your future, and know that it's going to be hard. It is absolutely going to be hard. I think you have to expect it to be like that. I think people are sometimes just surprised by, oh my God, this is just, I didn't think it was going to be this difficult. But that's what I would say, prepare for it to be difficult, and then don't get intimidated by the challenges, and just follow your gut. And you know what, if your gut says, I'm really unhappy and I don't want to do this anymore, then don't do it anymore,
Right.
you know?
Right. Well,
So
that
I don't know how
see
I
that.
got veered off there.
Well, no, that because that was leading me to what happens now when you go back and now you're a coach. Because I know being a coach is not the same as being a player, but it's the same as being a player. That you still have to be able to recognize the same things, yet now you have to be able to get other people to understand what you've gone through or what they are going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, blanket statements don't work. You can't just say, everybody, the harder you work, the better off you're going to be.
Yep.
Well, if you don't have the innate ability or the skill set to do certain things, that's not going to do it. You have to break things down. You have to go back to the basics. And you have to say, here's what needs to be done in order to be able to do this. Now, you have to be able to look within yourself and go, I can still get to that goal that I have. Or, no, that's, if I'm supposed to be 7 foot tall to do this and I'm 5'1", it's going to be a lot harder. Do I want to go through that? So that's the thing, is that you lead them to be able to make their own decision by being supportive and by being caring and by being objective, but also being realistic without saying, well,
Yeah.
you can't do that. Because a lot of people, you tell them they can't do it, they're still able to do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so when you get involved in the coaching and the clubs and whatnot, is there a sense of, I've been through this before, so I can help you? Or is it, wow, I've never coached like this before. What in the world did I get myself into?
Yeah, I think at the beginning it was definitely it was the latter, definitely, I felt. And I don't coach full time, so I have my, full-time job now at Visa. And then I coach kind of on the side. And when I first started coaching, I did have my own, like I was a head coach of my own team. The girls were age 11 and 12. And for the first couple of years, like I owned that team. Like I was the head coach for that team, and I had my assistant coaches. And yeah, it was like, I was excited to kind of like use my experience as an athlete to coach. But at the beginning, it was a lot of like, what the heck do I do? I mean, you know what to do as an athlete, but now you have to somehow translate that to other girls, and also athletes who are younger too. I mean, now I
Yeah.
coach juniors who I think it's a lot easier for me to relate to them because they're older, you know, they're in high school. But in coaching younger kids who are age 11, 10, 11, 12, it's like how do you still try to instill some of those lessons that you learned, but not make it so intense because they don't
Hmm.
understand that fully, you know, at that age. And I think definitely, you know, takes time to figure out. But now that I'm coaching an older age group, I know that I can bring a lot of value to them because these some of these issues that they're faced with, or you know, these challenges, it's like I've gone through very similar ones, and I can use my experience to, a lot of times it's just even showing them a different perspective,
Right.
you know, and having that open communication. I feel like, you know, in the last 5, 10 years, this whole idea of mental health and you know, being able to talk and communicate with your coaches has been coming up to the forefront, which I feel like has been great for me to, you know, kind of piggyback off of that and to develop these real relationships with athletes, and almost be not just a coach but also a mentor to
Right.
them. I think a lot of times there's this like separation, like, well, you're the athlete, I'm the coach. I come here and I'm here to coach your synchronized swimming, and then that's it. And I've had
Right.
coaches who are like that. Those, you know, those are the relationships I have with them. But I enjoy being able to go one step further and actually give them advice, or, you know, help them see something in a different light. Because honestly, I think back and I'm like, I wish someone did that for me. You know, like I wish I would have had somebody who was older and who could who could give me that perspective that I couldn't see myself when I was
Right.
younger. So that's what I try to give to the girls. Sometimes it comes off maybe too harsh, and you know, it's not, I'm by no means perfect as a coach, but I enjoy it, and I see the value that I can bring to them, and I hope that they, I know that they appreciate it. So yeah, it's been really fun.
And the fun part about it, I think, is that you can go back and look at your coaches, and what I've wanted to do is like, I need to go back and give that guy a hug because
Yeah.
I was a butthead, you know. So
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, I didn't get what they were trying to do then, but I get it now. So, and giving back to that, and with the perspective of being an Olympian and being through the grind, as you said, that
Hmm.
perspective helps because if you haven't gone through that, especially when you're a younger person, you don't know. First of all, most of them think they're a finished product at age 9.
Yeah.
And you have to get them to understand from here, I got to here. I wasn't ready to swim in the Olympics at this point, you know,
Hmm.
so you have to learn more and more and more. And being able to
Yeah.
get that perspective and be able to pass it along is very important.
Yeah. And
Well,
I think,
now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was gonna say really quick. I think something too that I remember when I was younger, like I didn't feel like coaches understood me, and now I see how the girls don't understand what the coaches are trying to do for them. You know what
Right,
I mean? So to be able to bring, to kind of explain that and show them, hey, you know, you did this, now I'm going to explain to you how that looked from the coach's perspective, and
right.
this is why, you know, we told you to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's really helpful for them, because a lot of times I realize so many misunderstandings happen because you don't understand each other. You know, athlete doesn't understand the coach, coach doesn't
Right.
understand the athlete, and then there's tension or whatnot.
I wish they'd stop picking on me. I'm just trying to do my best. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
we're trying to help you do better. But that's, as you said, the lines of communication. You have to establish that first so they know that you're in their corner.
Yeah.
Once you do that, you can tell them anything you want because they're going to listen. And they may take one step back. So trust me, this may not look pretty today, but in 3 days, you're going to get it.
Hmm.
And like you said, you know, like I said, they always think that they're going to have to be perfect today. It's like, no, you can mess up today. It's all right. We're trying to get you to tomorrow and the day after that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know. Now, how does that all play into, now that you are retired, how does that play into the quote unquote real world?
Gosh, yeah, the real world. It's I feel like when I was swimming, I was always hyper like concerned about what was going to happen next after I retired. You know, what career was I going to have? What was I going to do? And I think for athletes who come from, you know, smaller sports or maybe who didn't medal, it's not like you have this career ahead of you of being an inspirational speaker or doing appearances for, you know, for sponsors. It's like, no, you actually have to think about what real job are you gonna get. So I feel like I tried to set myself up as best as I could while I was still swimming, you know, getting my bachelor degree, getting my master's degree, you know, doing some volunteer things here and there, but still really nobody prepares you for that transition.
Right.
And there's kind of like the professional career piece of it, like, okay, what am I going to do with my life after this? And that's hard for some people because they just don't know. I think I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to stay in sports. I wanted to work in sponsorship. That was kind of my, you know, my vision. And now I've been kind of taking steps to get to that. But I think the harder part for me, and I think for a lot of athletes, and not even just like Olympians or elite athletes, but even collegiate athletes, is the whole like identity crisis part of it. Is that all of a sudden, literally in one day, like that, one day, you know, yesterday, I could say, if someone were to ask me, what do? You know, who are you? I would say, I'm an elite athlete. I'm training for the Olympic Games, blah, blah, blah. And then the very next day, when you've retired, it's like, I don't know how to answer that question anymore.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to be an Olympian for the rest of my life. I'm never going to be a former Olympian. I'm going to be a former elite athlete, but who the heck am I now?
Right.
Who am I outside of the sport? I think that definitely took me some time to figure out. Heck, I'm still figuring it out. And I think this is the piece that people don't really talk about. And so many people who you know are not part of the sports world, they don't understand the struggle that you go through when your entire life, I mean, from childhood until whenever you retire, this is your identity. You don't know. I didn't know a Maria outside of synchro.
Right. Right.
And so yeah, it's and there's no like support really. I think that's what I realized. Like there's 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 resources for helping you like write a resume and figure out like what, you know, how to apply for a job and things like that, but what about like finding out who you are? Like there's really no resources for that at all. And that's why that was kind of what inspired me to start writing. I started a blog a couple years ago, just because I had all these thoughts, and one of which is this whole topic of retirement and kind of moving on into regular in quotes life. Yeah, it's just like people don't talk about it. People don't uh non-athletes don't know about it, and it's not easy at all.
Well, when your persona is one thing, even to you, and then now you go, well, if I live a normal life, 3 times the amount of time I've already lived, I'm going to have to be somebody else.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's, yeah. And I haven't thought about that before. Not that you really thought about the first persona, you kind of fell into it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it seems to work out. It's like, now I become an advocate. Now I become this. Now I become that. I'm a writer. I'm a corporate person. I do this. And now that energy and that grind that you've gone through, you figure out a way to translate into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, do you want that grind to be the 9-to-5 job and all that, or do you want it to be something where you want to do what you want to do, or can you do what you want to do? And a lot of people that I've found have been able to go back into the communities and say, I can go back into coaching or into administration or something like that, still sticking around sports, mm-hmm. because that is still really who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but I think it depends. I've definitely seen some people who, after they are done with sport, they want nothing to do with it.
Right.
It's like,
right.
And, they want to totally, and that's usually, you know, people who have had negative experiences maybe
right.
with the sport, and they want to move on from it. It's almost like a, you know, healing from a trauma. And then there's other people who can't let go, and need to, and still want to be so involved in it. I think I definitely did not want to completely leave the sport, because I think it actually helped my transition, still coaching and still, being near the national team. I was on the board, I've been on the board of directors for 6 years now for USA Synchro. And I think it's, kind of, yeah. And some people stay completely in it for the rest of their life and they coach, because that's where their passion is. And maybe they don't have another passion outside of that sport, and that's fine. It's just, it's just different for everyone. But you still have to find, you're still losing the athlete identity.
Right.
Like, even if
Right.
you have the sport, like you're still coaching or whatever, you're still not, you're not who you were when
Right.
you were, when you were competing. So finding out who that person is without the athlete part of you
Right. That's
is
tough. Yeah.
like, who
But
the heck are you? It's literally an
yeah.
existential crisis.
Yeah. But I think what the key is, that passion that you had for whatever you did. You have to be able to find a way to channel that passion into something else, because
Yeah.
athletes are, especially to achieve the level that you achieved, there is a passion there, and you define passion however you want to, but there is a passion, or you couldn't do what you did. There's a passion for either the glory or the medal or the grind or whatever it is that you define for yourself. But now you have to figure out a way to transfer that into something else. You do that, you're okay. If you don't,
Well, and here's the
eh,
thing. I think the challenge is, I think you're absolutely right, but I think a lot of people struggle with,
mhm,
especially if you're transitioning into like a professional career. Are you ever going to find something that you're equally as passionate about as you were about your sport? And I've talked about this with, with other Olympians who have retired, or elite athletes who have retired. And it's like, I don't know, maybe your job, maybe your 9 to 5 job, you won't be as passionate about it as you were about going to the Olympics. I mean, that is such a
right,
huge goal. How do you match that
sure,
in a job setting, in a corporate setting? I mean, yeah, people go and, into business for themselves, and they're entrepreneurs and they're so excited about whatever they're launching. Maybe in that case you can match that passion. But it's hard to do that. And
sure,
I hear of like, um not obviously not in my sport, but somebody like, I don't know, like an alpine skier, for example, or uh somebody who, there's like extreme adrenaline going down the slopes, or something like that. And then you get out of that, and then it's like you can't find you can't find that same level of
right,
emotion and
sure,
something that's going to get you to feel those feelings. And I think a lot of athletes really struggle with that, like, oh my gosh, was that the best? Like, am I going to feel that way ever
right,
again? And for
right.
me, like, standing on the deck of an Olympic swimming pool, I don't think I'll ever be able to recreate that feeling any other time. But now I have space in my life to create new
Right.
memories and new feelings that
And
I
that's
that
what
I
you have to
didn't
live.
have
Yeah.
before.
Right.
So yeah, it's so complex. Uh, just, I don't know. I feel like when you're watching these athletes on TV, it's like they're just entertainers. They come around every 4 years. You watch the Olympics, and it's all fun, and you get to experience the emotions of cheering for someone and whatnot. But then it's like you don't think about, these are like real people with real stories and real emotions and real struggles after they stop competing. So
Well, one of the things I've asked people to set world records, and the question that I want to know is, when did you realize you've done something that no one in the history of the human race has ever done? And then what's the next step?
yeah, it's like, you've done something that nobody else has done before. How do you move forward from that? I feel like it's almost, it's an amazing feat, but then mentally and emotionally, as you move on from that, it's like, well, what else is there to do with my life? If that's like, I've reached the peak, what's next? And I mean, really the answer is you go and try to find another something that you can work towards another goal. If it's not, if it's not sport, then something else.
Well, the key to that, the best answer that I've heard is that we live in moments in time. And this moment in time will never come again, no matter what. 10 minutes ago is never going to come back. So that jump, that throw, that whatever that I achieved on that particular moment in time, I'll never do that again, and that's okay. I may do better than that. I may do worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
But that moment in time, I'm going to cherish it, but I have to understand that's what it was. And maybe, just maybe, I can do better than that. Again, if I go to the 2012 games, I want to go to the 2016 games and see if I can, do better than that.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding I cherish that particular point in time, just like we should cherish the good times, the bad times, and all that good fun stuff. So
mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to put it.
And it's really tough because as a layperson, I go, yeah, but you did something, and they go, no, that's a great way of looking at it. But also understanding I went to where I wanted to go, and I may not get there again. Mm-hmm. Just if you're a regular, say a straight line swimmer or skater or whatever, and you get a personal best. Are you satisfied with the personal best? Or you want to get a better than a personal best? Well, if your personal best is also the world record, maybe you can't get better than your personal best, or maybe you can. It's a matter of what you think you can do and what you want to do. So, yeah. So, well, I appreciate you doing this. This has been fantastic. I hope we didn't make it too difficult for you.
No, this was great. I think it's so fun to be able to talk about things like this. And yes, you're the one asking me the questions, but then I learn something always during these conversations for myself, either something you say from one of the other interviews that you've done, or as I'm talking about something, I end up discovering something that I hadn't thought of. So I love having conversations like this, and I'm so grateful to be able to come on and talk to you. This was so awesome.
Well, we'll have to touch base and see how things are going in the future. How's that?
Yeah, definitely. Good. I'd love that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.